All right, so we are live. We're going to wait a little bit, guys, before we dive into tonight's topic. But as we wait for more people to sign up and join us tonight, I will give folks a little bit of an update on a couple of things that have taken place over the last week. And some of those things, it's been really actually a pretty wonderful week in the city of Rockford because just today, we announced that the WNIT, the Women's National Invitational Tournament, is coming to the city of Rockford for their postseason play, which is this March, which we are really excited about. They're going to be, it's pretty neat. The athletes and team members are going to be staying at the Embassy Suites right downtown, which has just been completed. The teams will play right at the UW Sports Factory across the river, and they'll be able to enjoy the downtown area. So it's pretty fun and special. Next thing that's been great this week is, as many people know, that we stood up the mass vaccination site with the Illinois Guard, and that was announced Monday and started Tuesday, and they're off to a really good start. And I just want to remind people, one is COVID is very real. Make sure that you're continuing to follow all the mitigation efforts, wearing a face covering, washing your hands, practicing social distancing, but also make sure you are signing up to register for your vaccine. And you can register for that vaccine at WCHD.org, WCHD.org, and it's right there on the bottom of your screen. Make sure that you register. This new site is only by appointment, and you will be contacted via email. Some of us don't always check our email, so make sure that you are reviewing your email maybe a little bit more now once you've signed up and registered for that vaccine than you normally do. Another really good news is our positivity rate continues to go down. We are now at about 2.7% positivity. We've now had a couple days under 3%, which is just really wonderful. So that's a credit to all of you watching and all of Rockford and all of our employers taking this really seriously. A couple of last things is we were just on Tuesday was an election day, so we'll be welcoming a couple of new aldermen because they don't have a general election at this time. And so that's exciting for the city, but we also passed a road referendum. This is wonderful for the city of Rockford. It brings in about $16 million and allows us to leverage those funds into nearly a $30 to $40 million capital improvement plan each and every year. So that's great news. And one thing that we just made aware of today is there's a development on the banks of the Rock River right downtown next to the Rockford Public Library. It is done by a company called Bush Development, and that or Bush Construction, and that development is over $20 million. It's a 6-story new construction, over 80 units with restaurant or retail on the first floor. So really wonderful week in the city of Rockford. So now that we have a host of people joining us, I am really excited about kicking off this series, this civic education series about what the City of Rockford government does. And we're going to talk a little bit about the structure, the functions, and the activities of Rockford government. And this series is really exciting. And we've been asked to do this. Quite honestly, at almost every neighborhood meeting you go to, people talk about the importance of civic education. So we thought we'd start this series, educate folks, and if they catch it live, that's great. If they rewatch it, that's even better. Other thing, just totally selfishly, is this is really important because there's a lot of myths out there about what the city of Rockford can do or can't do, what we control and what we don't control. And why we operate sometimes the way we do. So I think throughout this series, we'll be able to put some myths to bed and really help promote education about the work that our amazing staff does. And so one thing that I've been really amazed with ever since I had the opportunity to be mayor back in 2017 is the city of Rockford really has phenomenal staff. We have so many wonderful people who work for the city of Rockford and work with tremendous dedication, professionalism, and just passion to serve our citizens. There are a handful of individuals that I personally have the opportunity to put into different positions, and tonight we have 2 of them. First, I'll introduce Todd Cagnoni. We have Todd Cagnoni, who is the city administrator. I will tell you, one of the very first things I did when I was fortunate enough to have the honor to be elected mayor of the city of Rockford was to ask Todd Cagnoni to be the city administrator. Just for those watching at home, you're not going to find someone who has higher integrity, who is more knowledgeable about the operations of the city, is more well thought of internal staff as well as external stakeholders than Todd. I'm really fortunate to have Todd as a city administrator, and I think all of Rockford is really fortunate. Next, I want to introduce Carrie Hagerty, who I absolutely love. Carrie, these last 4 years and she's been doing it longer than that, but these last 4 years, I can't imagine someone else than Carrie running, being the director of finance for the city of Rockford, because you think about it, it's been a pandemic. When I took office in 2017, we had years projected of deficits, really difficult decisions to be made. We operate with 1/3 less staff, and Carrie, you have just done an amazing job. And we asked you to do a lot early on, and you exceeded every expectation I think anyone could have. So thank you both for joining us tonight. And Todd, I'm going to start with you. So a couple of questions I have, and then we'll roll into some of the questions that we've received from citizens. And to all citizens, if you are watching, you can certainly type in questions. We will try to get to those. We do have about 10, 15 questions that we have that we want to get through that have already been brought forward. But please type in any questions or comments that you may have, and look forward to seeing that. First, Todd, tell us a little bit about the form of government that the city of Rockford functions under, and what are the roles of the mayor of Rockford?
Well, thank you, Mayor. And let me just thank you for those kind words and the opportunity to participate in this first civic educational series. You know, a little bit of background about the city of Rockford as a whole. I mean, we are the 5th largest municipality in the state of Illinois with about 147,000 people. You know, certainly Chicago's ahead of us, but we're, right in front of Springfield, and as it relates to overall population. 24/7 operation, 9 operational departments: police, fire, public works, community and economic development, our human services department, internal departments such as human resources, finance department, and our information technology, all working together to provide services to the citizens of Rockford. You know, that structure of government that you referenced is a mayor city council form of government, in that we have 15 elected individuals, 1 being the mayor and the other 14 being the aldermen, which make up our city council. Collectively, they are the legislative and policymakers for the city of Rockford as a whole. And certainly the mayor's role as the highest elected official and operating as the chief executive officer for the city of Rockford. We take much of our guidance from you, but certainly there's a significant role of our city council, who adopts the legislation, appropriates the budget for the city of Rockford, and collectively work together to advance our community.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Todd, I'm going to stick with you and ask a couple more questions, and then Carrie, I'll go to you, and then we'll kind of go back and forth. So Todd, I don't know all the positions off the top of my head that you've held at the city of Rockford, but you certainly worked in community and economic development department. You actually led that department at one point, and now as city administrator, you really get a unique view of us as an organization. What are some of those challenges that you see we have as an organization, a City of Rockford organization?
That's an excellent question, Mayor. You sort of touched on this on your introductory comments, but ultimately we have a great team here at the City of Rockford, and what makes the City of Rockford run is the people that are employed by the city. So I appreciate all the work that they do and understand their challenges. We have 1/3 less staff than our comparable municipalities, and that was determined through an independent evaluation by NRN, National Resource Network, that came in and evaluated our operations in 2017 as part of an effort to identify areas in which we could improve and strengthen our budget. And when you have 1/3 your comparables and you're providing the same level of services, if not better, than other municipalities, it really puts a strain on the operation. So I really appreciate our team, their level of expertise, and how they go about conducting business on a regular basis. We also have external influences, and when you talk about external influences, a lot of that comes from a federal and state level. A number of unfunded mandates that we're required to meet, and that pushes the burden onto our property taxpayers. A couple examples, lead service lines, right? As a municipality that runs a water utility, we recognize the importance of having clean, safe water for our constituents and our ratepayers of the water utility. And we want to do everything we can to provide that service in a cost-effective way. And, coming in and having the state mandate, all lead replacements take place in a relatively quick time period, that puts a lot of pressure on the ratepayers when we know we can provide safe water through a number of other measures, such as good drinking water practices and so forth. We also see unfunded mandates come regard to certain training aspects, other environmental regulations that put pressure on our taxpayers. Probably lastly, many times the federal and state governments will have policies or procedures, practices that municipalities are required to follow. The difficulty is, it's not a one size fit all for all municipalities. So when you throw down, regulations that affordable housing needs to go in a certain area, it may not align with our community goals. And, certainly the implementation of low income housing on a state and federal level has been one of those examples where we're working to diversify our neighborhoods, have mixed income approach, yet the policies and procedures from the state and federal government will put low-income housing tax credit projects in the same neighborhoods, just putting more affordable housing in the same area. And we're not seeing the outcomes that we'd like to see. So certainly that is a challenge as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Todd. And Carrie, I want to pull you in on this. So as we talk about the city organization, every year we get to do the amazing thing of talk about our budget. And I got to say, you do a wonderful job educating me, educating city council, and I think the public every year in all of our public meetings. But talk to us a little bit about how big our city budget is. And I know we have different funds. Could you discuss some of those different funds?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor. So the approved 2021 budget that City Council approved at the end of 2020 began January 1st. That's $295 million in total of spending for the year. That's about a 0.5% increase over 2020. The general fund, which is where our core city services are budgeted, police, fire, most of our public work services, that is $168.5 million. So it's a big chunk of how much of money that we spend every year to provide those core services. As far as city funds, we have something that we call general or special revenue funds. Those are funds that are designated for a specific purpose, right? So for example, the city receives a share of motor fuel taxes that we get from the state as part of the state sharing of those taxes. Those have a very specific purpose that is restricted by the state law that enacted that tax. We can only use it for street maintenance and street repair, street replacement. We can't put that money into the general fund because it's restricted by state law. So that goes into a special fund that's outside of the general fund. We can't use that to pay for anything. We can't hire additional police officers or firefighters with that. We can't do code enforcement activities with that money. So outside of the $168.5 million of general fund revenue, which is largely unrestricted, we have special revenue funds that make up the balance of that $295 million budget.
Awesome. Not to put you on the spot, but what do you estimate, if you don't have the exact number, what do you estimate in total we bring in through property taxes?
Property taxes is about $50 million a year, and the bulk of that does go in the general fund.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And Todd, you mentioned the role with the mayor and the city council. What do you see as the role of the city council for representing citizens?
Well, certainly City Council is a legislative body for the municipality, and they're going to approve, you know, appropriate the funds for our annual budget, as we discussed, the legislative items such as resolutions, ordinances, intergovernmental agreements, annexation agreements, development agreements. So they're really setting a lot of the policy for the organization as a whole. They're also a conduit many times of services from the City of Rockford to the residents and the neighborhoods. The aldermen are very involved in the residential capital improvement program, where they have a set allocation of funds and help distribute where those funds go on an annual basis within their ward. They also provide guidance and directions to citizens in regards to, filing a complaint for services, whatever that may be.
Okay, no, that's good. And Carrie, we've had a pretty challenging year budgetary wise, and then some good news. What are some of the big changes that you see, or the changes, maybe they're not so big, some of the changes that you see in the 2021 budget?
Sure. So the 2021 budget is generally what we would consider to be a status quo budget, right? So what does it cost us to continue providing services that we were providing in 2020? As you can imagine, as any organization generally sees costs increase year over year, that status quo budget costs more money to maintain. So that was really a challenge in 2021 to provide a status quo budget, but we were able to incorporate a couple of changes this year as well. We included, as it was widely communicated, a $1.5 million contribution to Rockford Premise. That will, the long-term funding for that is casino tax revenue. In the meantime, we will be paying for that out of our reserve funds, and we'll pay ourselves back when those casino revenues start coming in. In addition, we've included approximately $720,000 in equipment, storage, and staff costs to implement body-worn cameras in the police department. So that procurement process is wrapping up. So we would expect a recommendation to move forward to City Council shortly to implement that program.
Excellent. And just to give people an idea, Carrie, about how many staff do you have in the finance department?
The finance department's 32 staff total. About half of those are directly associated with water billing. So that's customer service staff on the phones and the staff that actually prepare and adjust the monthly bills each month.
And that includes the payment center when a citizen walks in and they're paying their water bill or other bill. Okay.
Sure.
Wonderful.
So yeah, those people that do make it down to City Hall, most likely they're coming in to pay a bill, and that's finance department staff that they're interacting with there.
Wonderful. And you talked about water bills and things of that nature, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but how come we couldn't just use, we often get questions, you guys make money off the water. Why can't you use that to pay for A, B, or C? Can you talk about how those are restricted?
Sure. Yeah. So the water fund operates as sort of like a business. So we set water rates to generate enough revenue to provide for the operation of the water system. We are restricted. We can't just increase our water rates to the point where we generate extra revenue that we can use in other areas. That's it. It's certainly it's not good practice, first of all. But the ratepayers are not supporting general city operations. They are only paying for the operation of the water system there. And we're restricted not only by general financial principles, but also by state laws that regulate how utilities operate.
Perfect. Thanks. And just a reminder, citizens, if you're watching, you can certainly ask questions in the chat, and we will work to get to those as we move forward, as we had a host of questions come in. So a couple of these.
Mayor, just a comment, just to tie back one of your earlier questions to the budget. And your question was, what are some of the greatest challenges we see as an organization? I talked a little bit about, the decisions that are made on a federal state level. Another example would be Carrie went through the effort that we've taken as a municipality to have a balanced budget. going into 2021, utilizing some of our reserve funds. And certainly 2020 was just as challenging in a number of cuts that we need to take in our budget. But right now on a state level, we have them talking about reducing the local government distributive fund to municipalities. So since for individuals that may not know what the LGDF is, that is the municipality's portion of state income taxes that we receive from the state of Illinois. So going back to 2011, that was at approximately 10%. Over time, it's been reduced, and we're looking at a 2021 about 6.6%. So we've seen significant reduction in LGDF dollars. But if they reduce that again, that's going to be another example in which we're going to have to go back, look at our budget, see how we fill that gap in, so that we can continue to provide the services that we do.
So, Carrie, is it accurate for me or anyone to say, as the state's income tax has went up, our share of our local funding has went down?
Yes, and certainly as rates increase and the state collects more revenue, they're not recognizing that local government's costs increase as well, and they're not proportionately sharing those increases with us. Our percent as a piece of the total pie continues to shrink.
Yeah, and I just want to, and Carrie, if I'm inaccurate, correct me, but I believe over the state's budget cycle, I mean, people hear 10% and they're like, oh, that's not a huge cut. You're still getting 90%. I believe that 10% is about $1.4 million. Is that right?
That it's $1.5 million in our 2021 budget if we experienced it for the full year. Yes.
Yeah. So just for those watching, Carrie and Todd are both probably a lot nicer than I am, but this is a point of real frustration for me, and I'm not going to say for them, but for me, of times when you have elected leaders and other government bodies really kicking the can down the road and not having to make certain tough decisions that impact just their body, but pushing it on to someone else. Because folks, that $1.4 million, it has to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is you ultimately. And so if they're kicking it to us, that leaves us very few options of garnering that additional revenue to keep with our operations. And I can promise you, neither the state or the federal government has held their property taxes the way we have, or held their revenue streams, I should say, the way that we have. So with that, Carrie, I want to jump to the big issue that every neighborhood meeting will talk about, which is property taxes. So what is the City of Rockford doing for property taxes?
Certainly. So, the average taxpayer in Rockford pays property taxes to about 10 different taxing districts. So the city is only about 22% of the whole, right? Where we have the school district, Rock Valley, the county, several other taxing bodies that you see on that bill. Obviously, the school district being the largest of the total. The city council, however, has recognized the burden that our reliance on property taxes has put on our taxpayers, primarily homeowners in the city. So the 2020 levy, which is the tax bills that will be paid in 2021, is the 8th consecutive year that the city has either reduced or held that levy flat. So city council's taking the discipline to find other ways to fund operations or reduce our operating budget in a way that allows for those property taxes to remain in taxpayers' pockets instead.
Thank you. And Mike O'Brien has a question I think either of you can answer, but Carrie, I'll stick with you since it touches on budget. Carrie, or the question from Mike O'Brien, and thanks, Mike, for chiming in. It says, who decides the total amount of the budget?
So we, as staff, the budget's a lengthy process. It's about nine months, and it can be up to a full year. We start off by looking at what resources we have to spend. We're doing estimates sort of on a rolling basis of what revenue is going to look like. We also then at a point in time say, okay, how much is it? I mentioned previously a status quo budget. How much is it going to cost us based on what we believe is going to happen as far as insurance and other supply costs, contract costs, things like that. What is it going to cost us to provide the services we're providing today next year, right? So we put together that cost estimate. We also then take into consideration any pending procedural or policy issue changes, as we did in 2021 with the body worn cameras. So that we had a clear direction. We wanted that to be included for 2021. So we added that into the budget. We have a mandate from state law that we approve a balanced budget every year. So we do our best to get to city council something as close to balanced as we can that allows for no cuts in services, keeps that property tax levy flat, and incorporates any changes that we know we need to incorporate into the budget. If we come to them trying to accomplish all those goals, but the budget is not balanced and we have a deficit, then we work with city council to make eliminations on the expense side or additions on the revenue side to get that balanced budget at the end. So really, it's a combination of department heads putting costs together, working with the finance department to put together a whole budget package, giving that information to the city council, and then ultimately, obviously, the decision on where money gets spent is city councils, and they make that vote annually as part of our appropriation process, is what that's called.
Thanks, Carrie, for that. And just so everyone knows, all those meetings, when Carrie mentions it's brought to city council, all of those meetings are public. We would encourage you to, come in when we are allowed to come and watch those meetings, participate. If you would like, reach out to your alderman, share your thoughts and your concerns regarding budget and any ideas that you have. So Todd,
Mayor, can I just point out too, we post the proposed budget. So whether that's balanced or not, we post the information that's provided to city council on the city's website under the finance department section. In addition, we are required by state law to hold a public hearing prior to adoption of the budget. So that is a great opportunity. Obviously we encourage residents to be involved at any point in the process, but budget hearing is certainly a formal time where residents can come and have their opinions heard on the annual budget process.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
So Todd, we've went through a really challenging year for a host of reasons. One big one is COVID-19. So when you look at COVID-19 and, people adjust their practices, what lessons have we learned as an organization that you think maybe have some staying power or can influence us post-pandemic?
Excellent question, Mayor. And we certainly have had a number of experiences, both good and bad, as a result of the pandemic. And, certainly one that we're participating in tonight is the utilization of technology on a more regular basis for informational sessions such as this. We've also been able to engage the public through public hearings for road infrastructure projects or neighborhood planning. And quite frankly, we're getting a better turnout online than we would get in person, pre-COVID. So, it's a tool that we're going to continue to use even after the pandemic. On the negative side of technology, you also realize how dependent you are on it. And when we shifted to having a number of folks work remote from home, that was challenging for a while in regards to getting everyone set up with the proper equipment, making sure that our hardware was set. And so we had a couple of snafus, but we were able to work through those. On a greater management side, I think we also learned, reinforced that we have excellent employees within the organization. And when we managed and worked with them on their work product, we need to be more focused on outcomes rather, whether they're sitting in their seat or not. And they've demonstrated throughout this pandemic that they can continue to get the job done, whether they're in the field, whether they're at their home, or whether they're in City Hall. And that really has been beneficial. We've relaxed some policies in regards to flex work. So, we may have employees that, have children that are not able to attend school, and part of the reason they need to work from home. But maybe that's not 8 to 5 where they're accomplishing everything for a variety of reasons. And, that has been a great opportunity. And I would say that, our organization hasn't missed a beat in regards to moving forward with the goals that we had for 2020 and now going into 2021.
Awesome. Thank you. Carrie, we at nearly every neighborhood meeting, property taxes, budget, and then pensions are brought up. And there is a lot of misinformation out there about pensions.
Sure.
Can you touch on a little bit of what type of impact do our pension payments have on our budget?
Sure, absolutely. So pensions are benefits that are guaranteed by the state constitution in Illinois. So they're earned by the police and fire personnel who do contribute to their pensions themselves. They pay a percent of their pay throughout their entire career to help fund their pensions. The benefit levels are set by the state legislature, not by city council. So the benefits are the same across the entire state for anybody who works in police or fire service. That said, the state sets the benefit levels. They tell us how we fund those pensions by allowing us to collect property taxes to pay for those. Property taxes are capped, right? We're a tax cap county. So our property tax levy in total can only grow by consumer price index, or the CPI, year over year. And as I already mentioned, we've kept it flat for 8 years. So without the total amount of property taxes being collected growing, the piece of the total property taxes that we collect that has to be used to pay for pensions continues to grow. And ultimately what that does is, as our general fund might grow 2 to 4% a year, but our pension contribution grows at about 7 to 10% a year. So ultimately, what we do is we end up taking resources away from other functions to be able to make our annual pension payment. We can't underfund the pensions. There is a provision in state law that allows for the pension boards that govern those funds to take tax money away from the city if we don't fully fund our contribution on a year by year basis. So it's sort of a perfect storm of conditions where we have no control over the benefit level. We have no control over how we pay for them. And we can't choose to pay less in a given year based on either investment results of the pension system, the invested pension funds, or our own budget constraints. That's sort of like the first bill you have to pay. You don't have a choice. So the city council has been very disciplined in making those annual pension payments, even before there was a state law that required us to do so. We funded them responsibly over time, but the obligations just continue to grow based on, pensioners living longer and their generous benefits, earned benefits that these employees receive when they retire.
So the question I get a lot is, well, Carrie, why don't you just switch them all to 401k? That's what the
Sure.
private sector would do. I mean,
Sure.
I run a business. Why wouldn't you just switch them?
Yeah. So, the state did, they passed legislation in 2011 creating a second tier of pensioners. It's not a 401k, certainly, but the benefit level is less. The employees, the growth in pension benefits, just like you get an annual bump in your Social Security distributions, you get a bump in your annual pension payments. That annual increase is less under the new structure. However, because those benefits are guaranteed in the state constitution, attempts that the state has made to reduce benefits for current employees have been challenged challenged and failed through the system. So really, unless the state can successfully get an amendment to the state constitution that allows them to reduce those benefits, this is an obligation that we will have to pay until those folks retire and pass away ultimately.
Thank you. And so we've gotten a lot of questions, and I would just urge other folks that are watching, please, one, share this stream so that others can see it, but also if you have questions, please type them into the chat. So one question that makes me a little nauseous for probably good reason is, Todd, what is home rule? And this person specifically does not want me to answer what home rule is. They want a nonpartisan answer to what home rule is.
So it's a good question, and certainly one we get a lot, and one that has challenges as a non-home rule community. So first, to understand what the difference between a home rule community and a non-home rule community is, a municipality with home rule status can exercise any power and perform any function unless it is specifically prohibited from doing so by the state of Illinois. In contrast, a non-home rule municipality can only exercise powers for which we have express right to do so by and provided by law by the state of Illinois. So this means that non-home rule communities are dependent on the state of Illinois in a multitude of levels. And I'll give you an example. And this is an example that we struggled with over the last couple of years, is that the state of Illinois allows non-home rule communities to charge $25 fee for video gaming terminals. The City of Rockford had no authority to change that fee or increase it from $25. While home rule communities at the same time could set a rate however they felt would be more appropriate. We knew that our local gaming industry here was supportive related to an increase in fee, and were very helpful to the City of Rockford. However, we had to go down to the state of Illinois, ask them for the authority to charge a higher fee than $25. So that took our lobbyists, that took our legal counsel, that certainly took quite a bit of your time, Mayor. We had to talk to our local delegation and ultimately demonstrate to them why we wanted to increase the fee on our video gaming terminals. Our time could be much better served working with the state of Illinois, finding more impactful legislation to help our neighborhoods, remove blight, for example. So for those, and there's certainly other reasons, it's a challenge. I recognize the concerns that citizens have, that a municipality is going to increase taxes. I would say this municipality has been pretty responsible to the points that Carrie made earlier in regards to not increasing property taxes or decreasing them actually over the last 8 years. So I think, most elected officials, city council, mayors, they recognize that increasing taxes is not a popular item. And there is going to be a referendum in regards to whether they should or shouldn't. It's called the next election for the mayor or the city council members. So I don't, although I understand the concerns, I think there are consequences if municipalities act irresponsible. I'd add that we do see that home rule communities are less dependent on property taxes, and understanding that's one of the major concerns is our community. It would be nice to diversify our revenue streams so that we can lower that tax rate.
Oh man, all I gotta say is I can feel my blood pressure getting higher and higher the more I hear about home rule. My 2 cents, I know this resident doesn't care, is there are no top tier cities that do not control their own destiny. You're just not going to find them in America. And the idea, you think about Todd's example, it's a really good one. You have the business community saying, yes, please charge, we accept, we will be charged more for these video gaming terminals. And you have the city wanting to charge more, but yet we still have to go and ask 177 people who only 5 of them represent any part of our city for their permission to do that. Makes 0 sense, but I digress. With that, all right. So budgets are really tight all across the country. So, why wouldn't the city of Rockford, I can let both of you touch on this, and maybe I'll start with Todd. Todd, budgets are always tight. We always hear, we'll just cut employees, lay off employees. Can you touch on that answer?
Why we wouldn't lay off employees?
Yep.
Well, I'd go back to, we have a third less staff than our comparables municipalities. And, we're at a point where we can't talk about, in all seriousness, laying people off without talking about disruption of service. So the more appropriate discussion would be, and I know that Director Hagerty has told me this many a times, is what services are we not going to provide if we're not going to have the proper folks in place to complete the task. So it's a challenge. I'd say when you look at 2020, Carrie and her team did an excellent job very early on in identifying and trying to estimate in regards to what our revenue reductions were going to be, throughout the year. So, we immediately suspended vehicle replacement. We suspended summer hires and temporary hires at all possible. We had across the board cuts in all our departments for training and travel. Certainly travel was real easy. It wasn't permitted anyways, but training costs and other expenses had to go down. And then we had vacancy control with all our departments. So we were holding positions open, all of 2020, or at least, several months, so that we could capture some savings in an effort to make sure that our revenues exceeded our expenses in 2020.
Absolutely. So again, a question I think either of you can answer, but residents asking, why does the city of Rockford have so many TIFs, and why do we give TIF money to everybody?
As the former Community and Economic Development Director, I'll be happy to answer that question, Mayor. We have 32 TIFs, and we're currently going through a process to evaluate a number of those TIFs. And quite frankly, it's going to result in the termination, where we're going to end some TIFs early because we don't think they're productive, and you might as well let the properties generate taxes, going to the rest of the taxing districts. We'll likely expand some TIFs and, create some new ones as a possibility. But our TIFs have, supported, tens of millions of dollars of private investment in the creation of hundreds and thousands of jobs throughout our community, have been critically important. And you look at some of the largest geographical TIFs is the Global Shade Park 1, 2, and 3, which is 3 TIFs that are in and around the Rockford Airport. And those TIFs have been critical in the airport's growth, in bringing business that we did not previously had. And, huge kudos to Mike Dunn and the Rockford Airport team for being the fastest growing cargo airport on the planet last year. And certainly the TIF didn't do that. Their team did it, but the TIFs was a part of that tool. And, we get discussions, and I'm certain people would ask and be curious in regards to, well, how are these decisions made? So back in, I think it was 2016, 2017, maybe a little bit earlier than that, we went through a pretty comprehensive process with a number of private citizens to help us formulate a TIF policy and establish the criteria and the decision-making process of, one, when we're going to create a TIF, and two, how we're going to provide TIF funds for development projects to support those. So we'll go through a pretty excessive evaluation of a pro forma for anyone that's asking for TIF dollars. We've predominantly transitioned on a pay-as-you-go basis, meaning that we're not going to go borrow or bond for dollars to give to a developer and then capture the increment. We're going to tell the developer, hey, you take the risk, you make the investment, we'll let you capture some of your TIF increment on a pay-as-you-go basis annually. And, I think that creation of that policy has certainly helped us drive better decision-making process, as well as transparent decision-making process on how we utilize TIFs.
Excellent. Thanks. And Todd, it seems like a lot of these questions are to you, so I'll give them to you and maybe do a little bit of a rapid fire on some of these just so we keep this under the hour that we promised folks. And again, if you have questions to those watching, certainly throw them in the chat. Todd, what roles do citizens have in the Rockford government?
So certainly there's a number of roles for citizens within Rockford's government. Yourself, Mayor, you have the authority to appoint citizens to several boards. That would include the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Liquor and Tobacco Advisory Board, the Traffic Commission. We have the Fire and Police Commission, which is all citizens.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So one other question that we get, and you can kind of dovetail into this, is who gets to hold the police chief and the fire chief accountable?
So that question's, dead on in regards to the earlier question on citizen participation. So the Fire and Police Commission is 3 citizen members that are appointed by yourself, Mayor, and confirmed by City Council. And amongst other duties and responsibilities of the Fire and Police Commission, they have the authority to hire and fire the police chief and the fire chief. So they have significant authority over the command staff in both departments. They also are in charge of the hiring process and a portion of the discipline within the probationary period, as well as promotions for police and fire. They create the structure. They certainly work with both chiefs through that process, as well as outside consultants on evaluating individuals, but they have a lot of authority and decision-making process on the staffing of our police and fire departments.
Can I add something to that, Todd, just because I think it's important? We, I think it's not this Monday, but previous Monday, we actually approved a brand new member of the Fire and Police Commission. Just for those watching, we're really excited. I think Rockford's fortunate. We have Ingrid Hartgrove that we just, I put forward and council approved. Ingrid Hartgrove, and Ingrid has spent decades working in HR over at Swedish American Hospital. She actually, one of the initiatives I can remember off the top of my head was that she helped lead their diversity implementation plan over at Swedish American. And we're really fortunate. We've also been fortunate, just so those citizens are aware, we have those 3 members. That's Sam Schmidt, who has been former CEO of Goodwill of Northern Illinois. We have Pastor Maurice West, Senior, and then we have Ingrid Hartgrove. Just recently, Jessica Jones stepped off, and she was previously HR director over at Rock Valley College. So I think we've had historically really strong people, and currently really strong people on the fire and police, because as you just listened to Todd, it is a significant, time-consuming, critical board for our community. Speaking of that, and speaking of diversity, what is the City of Rockford doing to diversify its workforce?
So our Human Resources Department is led by Sharice Hunter as the director of that department, and her team have created a diversity and inclusion recruitment strategy, which they have been implementing since she came part of the City of Rockford leadership team. That strategy has a number of tactics, but the ultimate goal is for the City of Rockford's employees to represent the gender and race of the demographics of the City of Rockford. So she will work collectively with our fire department and our police department that also have independent recruiting strategies for our community, as well as the City of Rockford as a whole. So a couple examples are we publishing our job postings in the right locations where we're going to get a diverse group of individuals to look at it? Are we reaching out to the neighborhoods, the churches, the untraditional locations to make individuals aware of the opportunities with the City of Rockford, so that we can, get individuals that may not otherwise apply for positions to apply, and ultimately bring them into the City of Rockford?
Yeah, I also think 2 things that she's done that are really important. And I apologize, I had to focus on something else for a second. So if you mention it, I apologize. But one is how she is geofencing our ads of those jobs openings. So let's say, let's just bring up an event that everyone knows. We had a huge event for Fred Van Vliet when he won the championship, and man, was that awesome. But for an event like that, you can geofence. And what that means is we can take that event and we can ensure that those folks who are looking at their phones during it can see ads up from the City of Rockford saying that we have job openings. And so, if your pastor's really boring in church one day and you pick up your phone, you can certainly see it there as well. So she's done that. And the other thing I think she's done is really ensure that the people who are doing the interviewing, because typically we have a team doing the interviews, the people doing the interviewing are also reflective of our community. A couple of other questions, Todd. I think one or two of them, and then we'll close out. And if anyone else has questions, they can chime in. Todd, do we have any control over the park district or school district? I can't tell you how many times I've been asked this question.
So no, we most certainly do not. Those are two separate governmental bodies with their own independent elected board members. Now, it's not uncommon for the City of Rockford, the Park District or School District, for our teams to work together through intergovernmental agreements and just good relationships. But no, as a local municipality, we have no direct control over either one, the School District Board or the Park District Board.
Okay. Last question for you, Todd. Right now is, what are we doing at the city, or what are you doing at the city to attract more people? And I think this question probably came from a citizen who has seen recent articles, quite honestly. I mean, we have to face it. We've lost population, and so has the state for many years in a row. So what are we doing to attract new residents or keep our existing residents?
So certainly, City of Rockford has some tremendous assets, whether that's our partners that we just talked about over at the Park District, the amenities that we have from private sector that complement those, the efforts that we're seeing downtown on the redevelopment, the efforts that we're taking to improve our infrastructures. There's lots of reasons why individuals would be attracted to the City of Rockford, including our housing costs, which are extremely competitive and in very high demand right now. Over the last year, we created the Rockford NIU Scholarship, Rockford Promise Scholarship, better stated, in which individuals that live in the City of Rockford and go to School District 205 can get a free 4-year education at Northern Illinois University. I mean, that is a tremendous savings, not only for our existing residents, but to attract new residents into the City of Rockford. I think as we look about, potential opportunities for not only investment, but to bring individuals into the City of Rockford, it's the whole idea in regards to remote work. We all got tested on remote work during the pandemic. Many of us have found that it is a productive way of conducting businesses. And, certainly on a municipal level, we're not the only folks that are conducting it remotely. A lot of private sector folks are, but we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place. And we really need to be thinking about a citywide fiber optic network. And how can we advance that throughout our community? High-speed internet services, business-to-business connections, making sure our entire community is served could be a huge opportunity. We've been working with individuals in the private sector to see if we can bring that forward, and we're hopeful that we could do that in the next weeks and months to come.
Thank you. And Carrie, you're not going to get off the hook. We're about to end a touch early, but we have a great question by a citizen. Daryl Swanson says, because of lower revenue streams due to COVID-19, has the budget been revised accordingly?
Yeah, so we started off 2020 as soon as COVID hit, making some initial projections about how much we might be impacted. We took some immediate steps right away. Right away, Todd mentioned several of them: to hold positions open, stop capital purchases. We did end of the year with revenue underperformance. It was not nearly as bad as we expected it to be originally, and we had supplemental grant funding from the federal government sort of funneled through the state that did help balance out our 2020 budget. We are experiencing revenue declines going into 2021. Our main revenue sources, main major ones, about $8.5 million down over where we had initially projected. We're balancing that through a variety of things, including expense reductions. We're also, luckily, we were in a position going into 2021 where we have what we call fund balance, right? It's sort of like our savings account or our rainy day fund that we maintain in the event that we have unanticipated expenses or reductions in revenue. That fund balance was bigger than it needed to be, bigger than council's policy requires. So we had about $6 million over the rainy day fund minimum that we could use to help balance our 2021 budget as we sort of get our arms around the duration of the pandemic, the duration of the revenue declines, without making some catastrophic cuts to staffing. So, just to put it in perspective, $6 million on our $160+ million general fund budget doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's essentially our entire finance, community development, legal department. It's several operating departments combined. And, it's also, to make those sort of reductions out of public safety would be huge losses to those departments. So the goal really was to keep services as flat as possible, as even as possible, so we could weather this pandemic decline as much as we could.
Yeah, thank you. And Todd, I guess you're not going to get off the hook either. Mike De La Rosa, I think that's how you say your name, Mike, so has a good questions. Are we attracting residential developers to the area so we can keep up with the housing demand and have new residential properties? Said home, and he just typed in again, he said homes that will attract medium to high income residents.
That's an excellent question. And we certainly are talking to residential developers and home builders on their interest. And quite frankly, the challenge that we're having, even though we have great demand and a limited number of houses that are currently on the Rockford MSA or the market, the square foot cost of existing home is still less than what the square foot cost to construct a home is. Mm-hmm. So even though we've seen those sale values go up and up and up the last few years, we haven't fully recovered from previous recessions, and the cost to build a new home still exceeds the cost of what it is to get an existing home. I think we're getting closer. I think we continue to see some built up demand, and with the low number of homes on the market, and as soon as those homes come on the market, they're getting purchased. I think we're going to have greater and greater opportunity for more new home construction, and certainly a component we'd like to see, right? We want to make sure as a municipality we're seeing balanced residential growth. So we want to see that our existing neighborhoods are being reinvested in and those property values are going up. But you also want to have some new home construction in the market to provide that opportunity.
Great answer. And good question, Mike. Thank you. So with that, I think we're going to come to a close here. Just want to say thank you. Just thanks for taking the time tonight, both Carrie and Todd, but thank you for the work that you guys do. For those watching, I get the opportunity to watch Carrie and Todd work every day, and both of these departments and all of our department heads work together and work with other departments, but because of their positions, either finance or city administrator, they're intricately involved in every single department on a whole host of levels, and you do it superbly. And Rockford's really fortunate to have both of you, and I couldn't be more lucky to have either of you leading both of these important positions. So just want to say thank you for the work that you do every day on behalf of the citizens. And thanks, as my wife would tell you, thanks for dealing with me. It's appreciated, and hope you both have a wonderful night. For those watching, thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to have more of these sessions, so please continue to follow along on our social media. In the chat of this, we'll include the date of the next session, and just want to say thanks everyone for joining. And again, Carrie and Todd, thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.